You've just wrapped up your annual checkup at Navezgane's regional hospital. You get in your car and take a right out of the parking lot, then a left. You're heading north. You're heading home. As verdant forest extremely abruptly transforms into bleak winter, actually, let's ignore that part for now, where mountain lions and doomsday preppers roam, you pass by the most mildly interesting building you've ever seen. You've seen it a million times. A 2-story green building with a mansard roof, a large window at the front, a thin obelisk at its side, a low-fenced wall pretending to guard its perimeter. It's a morgue, you think? Or maybe student housing crammed with a dozen half-adults learning how to human. The thought quickly slips away as you drive beyond it, which is probably for the best. If you knew what lay just a couple hundred feet from you in that moment, just barely underground, you'd slam the accelerator. We're going to stay here, though. Today, let's explore House Old Mansard, 02. Welcome to episode 16 of the Untold Stories of Navezgane. In this series, we're going to explore and dissect the most interesting places in the default setting of 7 Days to Die. From mountaintop mansions to fortified factories, we're going to learn the stories of those who didn't make it. Examining the perimeter of the house, there isn't much of note other than the obelisk. To the best of my abilities, I've come to the conclusion that this obelisk doesn't have any deep significance or meaning. It's just an obelisk. It's decorative. It looks kinda neat though. That being the case, we'll venture in through the front door and find a barricaded and defended foyer. Spikes and barbed wire block our paths, so before we head upstairs we'll hang a left and discover something odd. In the corner, a small desk area. Beyond that, a cozy fireplace sitting area, and Jesus Christ, what the hell is that? We have an empty coffin sat upon a countertop of some sort, flanked by a concerningly small amount of clearly human remains. Ah, well, there's more. A bit less concerningly sparse this time, but I'm already not loving the looks of this. If we hang a left and continue the only path easily accessible to us, we'll find ourselves in the garage where, upon first glance, our minds may run wild with sinister ideas and conjecture, but the puzzle pieces snap into place all at once. This must in fact be a funeral home. An open casket, zipped body bags. It's clear this was a place charged with the handling of the undead. What? The sheer quantity of body bags stacked on top of one another is a bit concerning, but it seems less likely to me that this was a poorly run business, and more likely that the number of corpses making their way here quickly overwhelmed whomever operated this establishment, and this was simply a preferable arrangement, as opposed to just splaying them on the floor, I guess. Regardless, there's plenty more to explore as we round our way through the kitchen past more boarded up doors, through the pantry and into the into the dining room, where another concerningly small pile of remains greets us atop a table. Did the people here, know Pete? I mean, they could have at least used a plate. Alright, it can't get much worse, right? Surely there's nothing even more concerning waiting for us beyond this spooky staircase leading into the basement. Just to be sure, we'll take a peek upstairs first. Lit quite nicely by the large front window, we'll find a pool table on the second floor. More doors are boarded up, giving us a single path to take as we check things out. As we do, winding our way through closets and holes in the walls, we'll find something a little less concerning than the remains downstairs and a little more perplexing. There's only one primary bedroom up here, flanked by several smaller rooms, none of which are being used as bedrooms. Instead, we find hospital beds, medical supplies, computers. It's almost as if the second floor of this house was converted into a small hospital. Perhaps as the apocalypses ramped up, people would take what they could get. Those operating the funeral home had some relevant medical knowledge and the space to take people in, so maybe they helped out where they could. We've discovered that the few proper medical facilities in Navezgane were almost certainly overwhelmed before they were overrun, so it would make some sense to find this setup here. If we want to stretch our theories even a little further, perhaps in the desperate pursuit of a cure, those most acquainted with death and the dead were called upon to figure out whatever they could. Though, judging by one of the only scenes of note in the attic, it's likely they didn't find much. I guess that's about all there is to find up here. we gotta go down into the spooky basement, don't we? Hold my hand? Well, immediately upon arrival, there isn't anything too out of the ordinary here. The hole in the wall is weird, but it seems to be more common than you'd think at the end of the world. The hole leads to the other side of what I can only assume is a large furnace, which is hiding a stack of books. Seems a poor place to hide extremely flammable objects, but, I mean, they're still here, so who am I to say? If we take a left then, past the... Okay, so we've stumbled upon an odd sort of meeting room? Conference room? There's a podium. Did somebody give speeches here? Let's not jump to any wild conclusions. Maybe this was just a conveniently located space for people to hold really small, really intimate funeral services? Or it's a cult. Yeah, cult stuff. The red wall, the podium, the secretive location. It's all screaming death cult. I know. And what a place for it too, am I right? But the fun doesn't stop there. To the untrained eye, this may seem the end of this journey, but to seasoned survivors such as ourselves, we can tell there's more to be seen here. Mostly thanks to the efforts of this zombie that so helpfully busted through the cloth curtains, backdropping the podium. Behind the death cult funeral service dictator speech room, we'll stumble upon an, at first, unsurprising scene. A small gray room contains some utility, a makeshift chemistry station, chemical supplies, several mortician's drawers, and a few too many body bags. This mostly makes sense given the scenario in which we find this room. What doesn't make sense is why it's here. Why is this hidden away in the basement behind a curtain? It wouldn't be half as suspicious if it weren't so secretive. I think we'll have to continue seeking answers elsewhere, specifically through the next metal door. As we make our way into the next chamber, we're immediately greeted by toxic waste, accompanied by even more piles of body bags and several tapped barrels. If we search the barrels, some of them may contain gasoline, but just as we're pondering what all of this is doing here, we're scared into action by a small horde of the undead barreling toward us on the left. It appears we've stumbled upon perhaps the greatest secret of this structure. A mass grave. Well, mass is a bit extreme. There are only 6 coffins in this rather large hole in the floor, but there are definitely more than 6 former humans quite upset with us for disturbing them here. Speaking of disturbing, well, this room. More coffins are splayed about on the floor and against the wall, accompanied by bloody remains and more body bags. 2 more candelabras flank a horned skull mounted above the next doorway, which just so happens to be heavily fortified. So what the hell is this all about? Did the owners of this establishment decide to start trying to bury away the insurmountable number of corpses coming their way? That would explain the haphazard nature of this setup. Perhaps. I have another idea, but we'll come back to it. Beyond this strange room, we'll find a generous cache of weapons and supplies on the left, just beyond a thick vault door, conveniently left open for us. To the right, what appears to be a relatively simple chamber with storage and a rather bare desk. Finally, at the other end of this room, escape. All we have to do is jump over the mound of sharpened sticks bound together with rope and not lose our grip on the way up. So, we've made it out of this madhouse. Now, just what the hell was actually going on in there? I think there are 3 distinct possibilities. Option 1, a funeral home overwhelmed. Beginning with the least terrifying, I wouldn't blame you for going with this story. All of the fortifications, the weapons, the caches, they're all explained away by the apocalypse. People were just trying to protect themselves. Of course we'd find rooms blocked off and hidden. People were trying to hide. Of course we'd find body bags and chemical supplies and coffins. This was a funeral home. Hell, this would also explain the abundance of corpses walking around and trying to eat us. Bodies were stored here in preparation for whatever was to be done with them. If they began escaping their drawers, tearing through their body bags, attacking anyone within reach, it would get pretty messy, and this would be the perfect concoction of ingredients for a disaster. This story would even explain the makeshift graveyard in the basement. As the corpses began walking again, whoever was still alive here needed to try and put them down for good. If a bullet didn't do it, maybe 6 feet of dirt and a layer of concrete would help keep them at bay. I'm still a bit concerned about the bits and pieces of a person left on the dining room table upstairs, but perhaps it's better if we don't know the full story behind that. Option 2, a death cult. Yeah, we all saw this one coming. I mean, come on, we're better to ritualistically worship some evil deity that craves death than a funeral home. There's an ample supply of death all around, and in Navezgane's story, certainly no shortage of bodies. The sinister red themes, the corpses strewn about, the creepy and mysterious altars, the mass grave. Perhaps this is where the last living inhabitants of this building found themselves, and this is where they sacrificially bid this mortal plane farewell. Perhaps these are those people. This story would also explain the extra security measures and armaments. I mean, what kind of death cult doesn't come prepared to kill? Perhaps they even dabbled in a cheeky little bit of cannibalism. It wouldn't be the first time we'd seen strong hints of that in Navezgane. Hell, this isn't even the first time we've run into the possibly occult. Navezgane seems to be home to many a psycho, and it seems quite possible this was just another one of their hideouts, cleverly masked in such a way that they could hide in plain sight. Now, for this last theory, I'm gonna need you to bear with me for a second, because it's a little out there and a bit more specific than the usual vaguely eerie stuff we find in Navezgane. Ready? Say it. Out loud. Option 3. Vampires. That's right. I believe it's possible this is making vampires canon in Navezgane. If you think about it for a second, this theory isn't too dissimilar from the death cult theory. All you have to do is replace psycho with vampire and it still pretty much works the same, but with a different twist. Instead of ritualistic sacrifice, or possibly even cannibalism, it's a front for bloodsuckers. I'm sure the blood of the relatively recently deceased isn't quite as tasty as it is fresh, but what a way to hide your vampirism. Hidden away in the garage or in the basement, under the pretense of embalming a corpse, a witty vampire could instead be draining it of blood for a healthy snack. The rest of the building can be amply explained by this theory as well. The candelabras scattered about the house aren't just fancy decor for the dead. They're iconic iconography for vampire abodes. The themes of red aren't just a tasteful business choice, they're symbolic of blood. The barrels, both wooden and metal, are there to store said blood. The biohazard warnings on the metal barrels would make perfect sense if they were in fact filled with blood, so they'd blend right in if they were discovered. And the coffins in the basement, they would explain why all of the extra rooms on the second floor were able to be converted into hospital rooms. Nobody was ever sleeping in them. They were resting underground. Right here. And there we have it, House Old Mansard 02. Which story do you think best fits this strange and secretive structure? Was this home to a cult? Was it really just a funeral home made to be grotesque and awful by the undead apocalypse? Or are there really vampires in 7 Days to Die? Let me know what you think in the comments section. I look forward to seeing what you guys think. But until then, and until next time, thanks for watching.